So today we're checking out an interesting new drum from PDP. This is an 8x12 limited edition all maple dry snare in a dark walnut finish. And it's kind of all in the name. It's a small but rather deep drum. And as the dry moniker suggests, this isn't really being marketed as like a popcorn snare or what you would think of typically doing with a 12. A lot of people will get a 12 and use it as a side snare and crank it up and get that really high like reggae ska tuning. This is not really geared towards that. This is marketed towards being something different and kind of the opposite. So I'll just get it out of the way that DW was kind enough to send me this snare, kind of with no strings attached. I'm not being required to make this video, and I'm certainly not being paid to say anything, but it was more like, hey, here's this new snare that we've got. A lot of people don't know about it. Check it out, see what you think, and if you want to share your thoughts, feel free. And so in making this video, I just wanted to share my impressions and answer the questions, what does this snare do and who is it for? So the first thing I'm noticing as I pull it out, of course, is the fit and finish, which I would say is very good, but not amazing. And by that, I mean, it's not a DW Collector series. It doesn't have true hoops and true pitch tension rods and all that stuff, but there was nothing left to be desired. So like nothing felt cheap about it. So it's got, you know, standard triple flange hoops, standard tension rods, pretty standard snare wires. It does come with the mag throw off, which is one of my favorite snare throws. It doesn't have the 3-position butt plate, which I never really end up using anyways. So it's got the mag throw, which is really nice. And then the actual finish itself is a dark walnut, which is a satin finish. It's a fairly basic finish, honestly, but it's one of my favorites. I'm always a sucker for naturally finished drums, and kind of a dark natural wood grain, I think kind of goes with everything and always looks good. So I'm really a fan of the finish. It looks good against the small PDP lugs. And yeah, overall the snare looks quite good. Now the next most important thing about what this drum comes with is the top head. Now I don't know exactly what they're using, but it was obviously chosen very specifically for this drum. It's like a really thick Power Stroke 3. It's got a muffling ring on the inside, but it's a really thick one, and it almost makes it like it's got a built-in big fat snare drum. So at any tuning, when you first play this drum right out of the box, it is dry, which you would expect from the name, but like it's dry. Like you hit it and it just goes, gah! Like whatever tuning it's at, you will not have any overtones. You don't need to put tape on it. You don't need to use moon gels. Like it is a dry snare right out of the box. And a big part of that is the top head. And if you're trying to go for a really deep, like thick or kind of dry sound out of a small snare, I like this about the top head that they included that with it, because it's like the combination of this drum with these dimensions with that top head works perfectly. And like I said, right out of the box, you can tune it to any tuning and it like has no overtones. So let me first just show you what this sounds like tuned high, medium, and then very low with the stock top head, which is going to keep everything very controlled and very dry. So here's what that would sound like. So a couple of thoughts I had while playing that. First of all, as I said before, but I will reiterate, it is really dry with that top head. So you can tune it wherever you want and you will not get any overtones. And if you're going for like just a tight, like dry sound, that is perfect. It's so nice to not have to do any gaffing or use any moon gels or anything like that. So that top head really works well for that sound. The other thing I noticed too was that it felt like a 12 when playing it, but it kind of didn't sound like a 12. It sounds deeper, it sounds bigger than it is. And this is kind of weird because usually I don't think of the depth of the drum affecting the overall timbre as much. And I don't know if that's what's doing it in this case or if it's just the thickness of the top head, but that was just one of my impressions and one of my thoughts as I was playing it was this feels like a 12, but it doesn't sound like a 12. It just sounds like a really well-controlled like 13 or 14. So I don't know if that comes through in the video, but that was just kind of a thought I was having while I was playing it with this head. Okay, so my next thought was it does the dry thing perfectly, but what if you do want to use it more like a traditional 12-inch snare? What if you want to tune it up and get that kind of ringy popcorn snare sort of sound? So for this, let's take the top head off and put on a more traditional DW like 2-ply coated Emperor type head. So we'll do that and then see how that sounds. Okay, so I actually thought that worked quite well. And again, I sort of had the feeling that it kind of felt, or at least sounded like a bigger snare, which maybe sounds dumb or obvious to say because yeah, it's an 8x12, but usually I don't feel like I notice the depth of the drum making as big of a difference for how quote unquote big it sounds. But I don't know, maybe that's what's going on with this one. Maybe it's something about you know, the shell layout, but for some reason it just kind of feels bigger than most 12s. So again, like I said, I thought that worked well, and you can tune that one up or tune it down and get a more traditional 12-inch snare sound. So it's versatile in that sense. But then I thought, wait a second, it's an 8x12 maple shell. Would it work as a tom? That's the size of the typical rack toms that I use. So could I put a standard head on the bottom, throw the snares off, and have a 12-inch tom? So let's do that. Let's take those heads off, and we'll take the snares off and see if we can put sort of a clear ambassador weight head on the bottom and see if it will function as just a 12-inch tom. So what I'll do is I'll get it tuned roughly the same as my DW Jazz series tom, and I'll just play them back and forth for you to see if this thing can double as an actual 8x12 tom as well. So despite the thing having snare beds and being built as a snare, it worked shockingly well as an actual 8x12 tom. I think you could completely get away with using it as that if you wanted to. Now, if you're buying this, you're probably buying it to be a snare, but I don't know, I just think it's kind of cool to know that it could be this really thick, dry, low snare. It could be kind of a high, cracky 12-inch snare, or it could be an 8x12 tom if you need it to be. Now, I will say, I tried engaging the snares when I had it set up as a tom, and it sounded like garbage, so it cannot do that. But despite that, one of my favorite things about the idea of this drum is that it is incredibly versatile. I really like the way that it's set up when you take it out of the box. I think that whole like small drum, but tuning it low or just keeping it really controlled and dry, I think that's a really cool sound right now, and that could be great as a side snare, or you could use that as a main snare if you were in a recording situation. And then beyond that, as I just mentioned, obviously you can have this be a traditional 12-inch snare, and you can have it be high and cracky or kind of low and ringy, really whatever you want. So it is quite versatile despite being called the dry snare. So ultimately, I think this is for someone who is not looking for their new main snare, but someone who wants to buy maybe a second snare, but wants to get a lot of value out of one drum and wants to be able to use one drum for a wide variety of purposes. I think this is perfect for that. So thank you to DW and PDP for letting me check this out. Hopefully this was of some value to you. If you have any questions about this snare, feel free free to leave a comment. Let me know what you think of the video. Feel free also to subscribe to this channel. Let me know what you want to see, and thank you for watching. See you in the next one.